I wasn't that interested in focusing on so much the historical setting or recreating an era through props and sets and costumes with huge accuracy. Those details came out in small ways throughout the performance through props that are revealed throughout the performance. And as I mentioned earlier, my interest was much more towards the characters, the family dynamic, their motivations, their interests, their lives, their inner lives. And that's not to say that historical research is unnecessary. It is. This is the moment, at the moment of this recording, it's post-World War II. This is a secular Jewish New York family. That feels significant to me in how I understand these characters. But I kind of wanted to know this family like peers, not as caricatures, but as people with real lives, dreams, and regrets. So I compiled a lot of research on each of the characters and organized them in spreadsheets. There's 15 main characters in Say Something Bunny, each with their own research path. And I'm going to share a little bit about how I came to understand one character, our Juliet. So Juliet sounds like this.
If David should marry Sue, he would receive a very beautiful estate in Westchester as a wedding present.
So Juliet is one of the central characters, although she doesn't speak the most. She's hosting this family gathering. She's often in the background, participating in the conversation when she can. In this multi-generational family recording, she holds this unique position and holds a multitude of roles as mother, wife, sister, daughter, and niece. Juliet is the mother of the main character, or in the main kind of nuclear family of the narrative, and she holds all of these roles in it, and she's really like the glue of the recording and the host. However, for most of my research process, I feel like she was kind of a flat character in my mind. I didn't really find that much information about her in the archive, and this was because of two letters, T and E. So her name is listed on the census record several times as Juliet, with one E and one T. And having been too decisive early on in the process that her name was Juliet with one T and one E, I was really kept in the dark about her history. The census was taken orally, so the spelling of people's names would be inconsistent from census to census. And also, people are constantly renaming themselves, especially at this time of like a lot of international migration. People would Americanize their names when they came here. So also, researching women is especially difficult because once they get married, that moment, there's this disconnect in their name and their genealogy from the first part of their life to their second half. But I was still curious about Juliet, so I decided a bit late in the process to try the other spelling of her name and added an extra T and an extra E, and then nothing came up still. And then I thought, perhaps I should search for her maiden name, which was Moore. And immediately, many photographs of a famous red-headed actress came to the forefront of the search results, but upon deeper digging through Google searches on pages 8 and 9, I finally discovered something. I found a post about a silent film child actress by the same name. Born in 1912, it would have made her the same age as a mother of two children in the 1950s. And she had been in several dramatic pictures as a child. She was a starlet around the age of 6 or 8 years old. This discovery just gave the character so much more depth. I hear her taking up very little space in the recording. She's quite distant from the microphone. And knowing this information that she was like a child actor in the silent movie era, and I had talked to people that said that she was almost like a silent movie version of Shirley Temple. She was like in a lot of films. But also that her career suddenly stopped very abruptly when her younger sister was born. It just created this whole interesting family dynamic that I was like, wow, you just start imagining what conflicts, what tension, what resentment might come from that. And so I tried to find more about her career, and I found a few more grainy images, and I read through old trade magazines to find descriptions of her films, knowing that they were very likely lost, and they only existed in fragments. But I did track down a print of one film at the Library of Congress. So I traveled to Washington, and I scanned through the footage on a Steinbeck, but I couldn't find her, and it seemed that 1 out of the 5 reels was missing. And it's my belief that if an archive is absent, then you can use the fragments that remain to try to imagine what no longer exists. So I decided to reenact a scene from Juliette Moore's film, The Silent Master. So I feel like these gaps leave room for invention and play, and this pleasure and play is very important for my research practice. It's not just being disciplined in reading. I can't do that for very long. It's really about following my curiosity and what I find interesting. And it's always my own path through this material, as it is with everyone else in their research practice. Like, I think if a New York Jewish historian got this material, they would research it in a completely different way than I would. Our interests are our own. And so when I was at the Library of Congress, I felt very defeated, and that I wasn't able to find this Juliette film. And it left me with a lot of time to just hang out at the library and just look at stuff. And so I wandered into the Research Center for Recorded Sound, and I ended up chatting with an archivist there and told him about my project and mentioned that he had some recordings of theater that was made in the 70s. And that was a time of theater that I was interested in relationship to this project. I ended up finding a recording in the archive from the 1970s that I wanted, but I actually didn't know that it existed, that related to the main character, David, the eldest son. So it was very Kismet. He made this theater performance, and there was a recording of it downstairs that I was able to find and failing to find this other thing. So it just felt very like connected and wonderful. Part of my new work, this is a photograph of my great-grandparents' home. Well, actually, correction, so it's a JPEG exported from a PDF, which was made from a scan of microfilm, and the microfilm was a copy of a file that had a photograph of my great-grandparents' home in it. So I knew this home existed, but like this image, my knowledge of this home was very hazy. I didn't know very many details about it. And you see, I've never had the sense that my extended family had a particular interest in our family history. Whenever I'd asked about it, they'd tell me to go talk to another family member for my inquiries. And I'm sure I'm not the first person in my family to have tried to understand this and have given up, feeling like perhaps there's not a story there. So I was quite surprised to receive this email from my father last year. It read, "Hi, attached to this link is documents for your great-grandfather. These are documents pertaining to the family's relocation from BC and the disposal of their property. It's in PDF format, and it's over 100 pages. Cheers, Dad." And just to contextualize this email a little bit and review what I had understood about my father's family history at this time. So my great-grandfather and grandmother immigrated to Canada from Japan. The year I don't know, but it was before my grandfather was born because he was definitely born in Canada. Because every year I remember we would celebrate our birthdays together. We were both born in June, he on the 15th and me on the 21st. He was born in 1908.
Blow out the candles.
Whoa.
I know that because I've seen his gravestone. It reads Kiyomi Kobayashi. And I knew my grandfather was born in British Columbia, that he had several brothers and sisters. Their names I didn't really know. And I understood that they worked as fishermen on the West Coast and that during World War II, they were forced to relocate to Manitoba, and eventually ended up in Toronto. At what point in time, I don't know. And I know that they did have to start over, that the government had taken away their boats or something, and that my great-grandparents lived with my grandfather and his wife and his 5 children, one of which, the youngest, was my father, George Kobayashi, otherwise known as Dad, who sent this email. So there's this project at the University of Victoria called Landscapes of Injustice that digitized and made available the government files on all of the Japanese Canadian families who were relocated and interned during World War II. And they did a lot more, but I'm not going to talk about that today. This image of my great-grandfather's house is from that PDF that they digitized. And this PDF was perfect. You know, it was dry, it was bureaucratic, the information was dense, but full of gaffes and left a lot to the imagination. And this is my great-grandfather's file. His number was 2304. And it led me to more files on each of my family members who were documented by the Office of the Custodian. And so, you know, just looking at this page, what do I see? The photograph is backlit. It looks like they tried to prepare this for a 2-ring binder, but then they failed to use a whole bunch of times, maybe 5 or 6 times. And the photo was taken on April 13th, 1943. The photo was taken at 110 Moncton Street, Steveston, British Columbia. And I want to see this house more clearly, and so I found an interview at a community museum located very close to 110 Moncton. The interviewer was Marilyn Clayton.
Right, you don't have to worry about leaning close or anything, just
right?
so long as we're standing right here.
She interviewed my grandfather's youngest brother, Yutaka Kobayashi, who everyone knew as Kobe, 31 years ago in 1991.
So our house was 110 Moncton Street. And we built, my parents built a home there. A nice pink stucco home in 1937.
And then that would be where you grew up, did you?
That's where I grew up.
So the house was stucco, and the house was pink. I have a box of family photos that have largely been preserved due to it being untouched for many years. Many are not labeled, most are not organized into albums. But I think, and I don't think that I think any of the photos that were actually taken in this home were actually left there during the war. I didn't find any in this box because I think my family thought that they were going to go back to that home when the war was over. That's what they were told. And so I want to start imagining this house. I want to imagine what's inside of it, and this document will allow me to do that through its inventories. So that's what I'm hoping to do. I want this document to become something else. I want it to be useful in some way. I'm hoping to reconstruct a history from this document and also use it in a way that wasn't intended. And as you've seen a glimpse of it, my practice for the last 15 years has revolved around imagining the lives of other people, from the objects that they've lost, discarded, or been separated from in some way. And I didn't really make the connection at all between my work and my own family's dispossession until I had started this relationship with this custodial file.